Welcome, everyone. My name is Andre Early. I represent the Rochelle-White Plains Alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated and currently serve as the co-chairman of the Social Action Committee. We aim to bring forth some critical issues that need to be addressed within the communities within Westchester and Rockland counties. And we're just happy to be here and able to host this fourth installment of our social action with NRWP. Social action with NRWP, specifically, our panel discussions have been centered on components that are centered around systemic racism within this country that we love so dear. So, excuse me. And here it is. It was just, I don't know if it was coincidence or a blessing that this fourth segment ended up on the fourth Tuesday of May, May 25th, the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. But then just when we look at the bigger picture from a collective standpoint, here we are still addressing and trying to provide solutions to an ongoing problem within our country. Tonight, we have with us an awesome panel, and I'm just very excited about what they bring to the table. And I would like to have this opportunity to introduce our panelists for the evening, and then of course allow them a few seconds to introduce themselves, what they do, and of course what they bring to the table. So with that being said, I would like to first introduce Miriam Mimi Roca, who currently serves as Westchester County's district attorney. Oh, hold on.
Thank you. Yep. Thanks, Andre. Thank you so much. And it's great to be here with this group. This is a great group, and I too am actually really looking forward to this conversation. There are obviously, an endless number of important issues to talk about in this space of race and race in the criminal justice system in particular. It's something that I've been very focused on since I launched my campaign, and now have been able to really start to get to work on in the past couple of months. And I'm really proud of that, because it went from talking about, how do we try to work on eliminating racial bias in the criminal justice system? How do we make police more accountable? How do we build trust with the community? Okay, now we're doing it. And I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of those ways. Leroy Frazier was a part of my transition team and has been an advisor. And so it's great to be here with him and everyone else.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce Ms. Rasmia Zetar, Executive Director of Strong Youth Incorporated. Did I get that right?
You got it perfectly right. That was awesome. Thank you guys so much for the invitation. So I am representing Long Island tonight. I am, as mentioned, Rasmia Zetar. I am the Executive Director of Strong Youth Incorporated. We are a youth gang gun violence prevention and intervention organization. We do provide direct services, but I'm here uplifting, and I'm super proud of really the organizing and advocacy work that we do, partnering. So a lot of our direct services involve walking with community and teaching them how to use their voice in order to affect change, policy change and system change. We see that as one of the most effective forms of direct service is walking with community to do that. throughout the last year, I was honored to sit on two very important committees having to do with police violence. One, Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability, and the second, Long Island United to Transform Policing and Community Safety. You know, 2 out of 3, those were 2 out of 3 of the most biggest coalitions Long Island wide that really had a great influence on the development of our police reform plans and really pushing the envelope in ways that Long Island really was not ready for. We know that we still have our work cut out for us. For those of you who don't know or may be familiar with Long Island is one of the most highly segregated, racially charged regions in New York, and some may even argue in the country. So it's an interesting region to be doing this work. And as you know, the speaker before me said, you know, it's exciting. Most of my career has been spent trying to bring awareness to the fact that these issues exist in Long Island. Long Island has been masking these issues, really presenting itself as, you know, the nice pretty suburbs of Long Island, of New York City, where nothing really happens, when the reality is that there's ugly truths that have existed for decades out here. So I'm super excited to finally have the opportunity to be part of that are making moves and making things happen. But thank you guys for the invitation tonight, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Leroy Frazier, Westchester County Police Reform and Reimagining Task Force. Mr. Frazier. Who needs to unmute?
Good evening, everyone. I'm very honored to be a part of this panel tonight with the esteemed panelists that are present. As Andre just said, I'm here principally because of my most recent ventures, and that is co-chairing the Westchester County Police Reform and Reimagining Task Force, along with my co-chair, Mayo Bartlett, and of course, with the help of our moderator, Andre, and my fellow panelist, Legislator Smith. We were able to spend about 7 months working intently on satisfying the governor's mandate, and more importantly, before that, the formation of the task force by the county exec, George Latimer. And to that end, we came up with 51 recommendations that we submitted to the county exec, who then submitted to the county legislators, and who then even added an additional 52nd one that we'll probably talk about a little later. And just going through that process was very educational. I thought I knew everything after 38 years in the criminal justice system, but I've learned a lot within the last 7 months. I agree, Andre, that it is very noted, I should say. We should definitely note the fact that this is on the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. And that was the reason that we were able to do all of the work that we've done since then, so that we can make some good come out of that tragedy. I look forward to having a fruitful conversation tonight.
Thank you, thank you. Next, we will have Mr. or Legislator Colin Smith, Westchester County Board of Legislators, District Number 1.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Early, for inviting me to participate this evening. As you stated, I am a Westchester County legislator here. I represent District 1, which is in the north western part of the county, Peekskill, Cortland, and Yorktown. I also am a member. I was a member of the Westchester County's Police Reform Task Force, and I also chair the Board of Legislators Public Safety Committee here in Westchester. And so when the final report was submitted by the committee for approval, it went through by the task force committee. By the task force, it went through my committee for final. I say final approval, but really it was just going through as Ms. Fraser said, going through the 51 recommendations and having members of the task force walk us through the process. So that was a very robust process. I think we had somewhere on the order of 11 or 12 committee meetings inside the space of about 6 weeks, which may not sound like a lot, but in terms of committee life for the Board of Legislators, that's a lot of meetings. And you know, the reform report, the task force report came to us at about 171 pages and left us at about 735 pages. A good portion of that, of course, was public comment and transcripts of meetings and documentation that was submitted by the public. But like I said, it was an intensive process. In my opinion, it was a robust process. We included not only the task force members, we included members of our public safety department here in Westchester County. The county commissioner, Thomas Gleason, was a part of each of those discussions, as were several members of key members of his staff. The district attorney's office was involved in the process as well, and so we feel that it was a healthy process, and but it's just the beginning. I think it's been alluded to by some of the earlier panelists. This is a process. Reform is a process. It is rather fortuitous that we are here on this particular day, 1 year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, and so in his memory, I am humbled and honored to be able to continue moving forward with the work that unfortunately took his life, but it took his life to bring us to this point. But it's a point that we needed to be at, and happy that we are moving forward with it. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Clyde Vannell, currently serving in the New York State Assembly, District number 33. Kind sir.
Brother Early, first of all, thank you. I have to give a major shout out and really praise and honor the New Rochelle-White Plains Alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated for hosting this and putting this together. As everybody recognized, it doesn't go unrecognized to see, on this very date that we're having this conversation 1 year ago, what this world witnessed. It's also not a coincidence that an organization that is an organization that's primarily of African-American men holding this conversation. Very important to do so. The importance of these conversations cannot be understated. We have lawmakers on this Zoom. We have community advocates on this Zoom. We have prosecutors on this Zoom. We have community members on this Zoom. We can only improve by having this kind of dialogue before and not after a tragedy. We can only improve if we have these kinds of dialogues to make sure that we change and address and I don't even know if it's a criminal justice system when it affects just us. I mean, I went to for the first time, I went to a prison upstate, and to see who was mostly there, and to see why, and to see the process. And again, we could go on and talk about the cradle to prison pipeline, but how do we stop it? How do we change it? How do we change the normal and make a new normal? And we'll talk about different ways and different things that we have to do, but we have to understand that it's a journey and a process, and we have to be serious about it and face it directly, with intention. Oh, and did I mention that I'm a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated? That's how I wanted to start, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you, kind sir. Look, Brother Fraser, you're gonna respond to that?
I was going to say there are two of us on here, brother. You know that. Three with the moderator.
Yes, it's kind of weighted, but it's all good. It's all good. Once again, thank you for joining us this evening. You know, I want to start off, just put things into proper context, and for the most part, let's talk about a lived experience. So, you know, I tell a story about me and a bow tie. For some odd reason, everyone thinks it's so fashionable, and technically, yes, it is fashionable. You don't see it too often, but believe it or not, because of an experience I had a little over 10 years ago, I had to do something that was a little different. I was stopped in a bodega down in the city, and you know, it was one of those stop and frisk type of situations, and I'm sitting here like, I can't believe this is happening, you know, to little old me. And I'm sitting here like, yo, excuse me, sir, who didn't even identify himself first. But I was just like, is there a reason why you're attacking me like this? Well, you fit the description. Oh, okay. All right. So from that point on, I said, you know, there's some things that I cannot change. I cannot really change. I cannot change the way that I look. I was born this way. So, you know, to counter that, I said I was going to do something a little different. I learned how to tie a bow tie. So you wear a bow tie while you're out and about. If I fit a description, you better make sure that the bow tie is included in that description. Because if this doesn't subtly stand out, come on. So, you know, and that's our, you know, the majority of us that, you know, that are, of course, within a fraternity, and you know, just us as young men, just men, Black men in this country, that's our lived experience. And so I say all that to say, we're going to kick this off, and I'm going to point this one at, you know, I'll go with Colin or Clyde. You know, commission after commission. You know, when you think about the historical components of this country, riots have taken place in the early 1900s, in the middle 1900s, the late 1900s, in the 2000s. For some odd reason, commission after commission is created to once again identify problems, but also hopefully provide solutions to these problems. My question, what will it take to eradicate or dismantle systemic racism within our criminal justice system? We got.
All right, I'll go first unless the assemblyman wanted to take a stab at it first. Okay. Great. That's I mean, obviously that is a question that I think is always sort of right below the surface, at least for many of us, whenever we come to these flashpoints or these inflection points where something happens that really shakes the conscience of the community, of you know, of society. And we all begin to talk about change and reform, and we can't let this happen, and so on and so forth. And then, you know, there's a commission put together, or there's legislation proposed, or any number of things that seem to indicate, oh yeah, now so now change is coming. But by many estimates, by the opinions of many, they often fall short. They often fall flat. I think to some extent, that's kind of the nature of the democratic process, small d democratic process, in that you know, there's so many, there's so much in that, you know, this, when you talk about systemic racism, when you talk about a system that for centuries has favored one group over another, or has, you know, has oppressed one group and uplifted another, however you would want to say it. So I think in a very real sense, in a very literal sense, one answer to your question, in my view at least, is that I don't know that we'll ever be completely free of systemic racism or the effects of it on our society, whether it's here in this country or some other part of the world. But that shouldn't be a reason to not plow forward as we are doing now, as has been done in the past, because if you look back over history, you see that there has been progress, at times significant, but more often than not, probably more, you know, a step and 2 steps forward, a step and a half back sort of scenario. And I think it's on us, those of us who are, whether we're activists, whether we're elected officials, whether we are prosecutors, or whatever our position might be, to try and make the best, you know, decisions that are going to have, that are calculated to have the most impact, and to move us forward in a direction that is more fair and more equitable for everyone. I think just, you know, and I'll end with this, because obviously I'm sure we could all go on and on about this particular question. I think here, in light of the governor's executive order with regards to police reform, in Westchester at least, we have come up with several proposals, with several initiatives, several policy changes, and several legislative issues that we want to address legislatively, that we believe will move forward, will move us forward in terms of bringing about that change, and bringing about and further dismantling the racism inherent in our criminal justice system. But you know, there's no magic wand or magic pill for this. We have to just keep moving forward the best way that we know how, and we can get into more specifics as we move forward in this panel, because I know other members probably want to weigh in on this. But thank you,
Brother Early, with intention. We have to do it. It's not going to be easy. Systemic change means, right, trying to address the system. That means we must have power. It's very important for us to have the right prosecutors in, right? Very important for you to vote for the right prosecutors. Very important for you to make sure you have the right judges in space. Very important for us to at the beginning become police officers. Very important for, once we're police officers, to try to go up in the ranks and not just retire early. We have to also be there long enough to be able to have seniority, to be upper level in the police department. Very important for brothers like Colin to run for office. Very important for good people to be in office. Very important for us to have this conversation. But then we can't forget our cats in the streets. We can't forget the regular, folks. To make sure, very important for us to make sure that there are economic opportunities for young brothers and sisters. We just legalized adult use cannabis. How many people that look like me have been in jail for adult use cannabis? If we don't do it right, how many of us are going to be in the business? Right? We get criminalized for it, but when it's time to decriminalize it, are we going to have a role to make sure that people that were victimized by it profit from it? We have to be intentional to make sure that, again, when you're trying to improve a system, and systemic means that it is baked into the cake. We have to try to make sure we address all aspects of what we call of the system to try to get to a more perfect system. But it ain't easy, but we have to work on it.
Thank you both. Clyde, it's interesting as you say, intentional. I was just reading an article today in regards to Hudson Valley and the lack of diversity within law enforcement. And you know, from where I sit right now, of course, you know, I see some things need to change, and we do have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, Brother Early, here's a short example, real short example. In my district, I thought we had a problem. I don't know about you guys. I don't know if you guys are in New York or where you are. I'm sure everybody's in New York. Most people here from New York, but we have a big issue with people, kids, young people riding ATVs and dirt bikes. Guess what? We found out that that's a problem all over the state. Maybe a problem in your community. How do we deal with that? Well, my local PD said, you know what? They're going to give people rewards to identify people that have illegal ATVs or what have you. One of the things that we can do, what we're trying to do is say, we found that there's a program that teaches young people STEM in the science and physics in riding these motorcycles, teaches them, trains folks how to fix the motorcycles, and then creates events around the space. These are ways to try to turn something to just from criminalizing it to making it something, to turning it something around. These are different ways of things that we need to look at how to address some of these issues. And that's what I mean. That's some of the issues that what I mean by intention.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Leroy, from your perspective, where or when does law enforcement accountability begin?
Brother Early, I will just tell you that as a lawyer, accountability began as soon as I raised my hand to be sworn into the bar. I would argue that for police officers as well, when they take their oath to protect and serve, that they are, in order to do that, they're going to use all of the training that they have received up until that point, but also their accountability begins at that point as well. And who are they accountable to? They're accountable to the public, I would argue. I say that because if you look back at the origin of policing, a lot of times police like to refer to a British lord who started the first organized police force, and his name escapes me right now. However, when it was started, they talked about being accountable to the people. That's why they're called public servants, and being accountable to the community. And so over the years, it has seemed and it has evolved so that sometimes you find that police want the community to be accountable to them. When they say, whatever they say, you're asked to obey and not ask questions or what have you. But I think that we should go back and look at things from the beginning, because if in fact you're going to be accountable to the public, then you're going to get and retain a lot of the things that we're going to talk about tonight that goes along with accountability, such as transparency, community involvement, and being able, you'll be more effective then. And they will be able to build trust with the community. And that's how we'll get to the goal in the first question that you talked about, in terms of getting to a point where we are not in the situation that we find ourselves in 1 year post George Floyd's death.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. Mimi, would you care to touch on accountability?
Accountability is it's a word I maybe overuse these days, if that's possible. So a lot of what I've done since I took office, I think goes to the issues of accountability. and the racial issues that we're talking about and police. Okay, so first of all, with very limited resources, because resources in government are always an issue, we have increased the size of our Public Corruption Bureau, which is now divided into 2 sections. One deals solely with law enforcement integrity. Now, I will be transparent with you. There's only 2 prosecutors, but that's 2 more than there were before. 2.5. I'll say 2.5 because there's one that goes back and forth. So we have 2 prosecutors who solely do investigations of cases involving complaints against police officers. And then we have 1 prosecutor who does solely public corruption, white collar type of work, and then 1 that kind of goes in between. For our office, that's a lot more resources than we had before. The prosecutors that are focused on the law enforcement integrity, they report directly to me and my chief assistant, and we review every single case that they review. So no decision is made on a police complaint without me getting I don't mean like a 5-minute review. Like, we get PowerPoints and videos, and it is probably the area I've spent the most personal time on. And I'm proud of that. I mean, it's something intentional to use the word here, because they're so important to everyone. And even where we cannot bring charges or where we don't think charges are appropriate, I have personally called up the police chiefs of those departments to tell them issues that I see, right? Because they may be issues that just don't fall under the criminal laws, but they're things that, are really not best practices. And we can write a formal letter, and we have in certain cases, but we also, a phone call from me to the police chief or police commissioner is probably the best way to handle that. And I've been very pleased for the most part with the responses that I've gotten on those calls. I can talk about some specific, some cases actually have been public, so I can talk about them, but that's part of accountability to me. It's just, our job is to prosecute the cases where they're criminal. That's not going to be a huge number, but we have to be more focused and aggressive in that area than we've been in the past. But we also need to make sure that even where there aren't criminal charges, that there's some kind of follow-up. Now, I think, this is where the Police Reform Task Force suggestion about a civilian type review board is so important, because I think that's the piece that's missing, where right now, where it's not criminal, but you don't want to just leave it internally to the department. That's what we're missing. And so I have publicly supported many recommendations, including that one of the I guess it's commission, not task force, right? I hope that comes to fruition. The other piece of it is the accountability is transparency and data. So again, I have always been very explicit and intentional in talking about that. I recognize that there are racial disparities in our criminal justice system, period. I don't need anybody to show me data to tell me that, but that only gets us so far. I am a big believer in data in many different ways in the criminal justice system. And one of them is, show me where the disparities are happening exactly. Where are the worst ones? Is it happening in the arrests? Is it happening in bail decisions? Is it happening in sentencing? Is it happening in charging decisions? And so we literally today, it's actually very fortuitous, announced the first ever chief data officer in our office, Kathy Kaufman, who's part of the police reform I forget what it's called exactly. I'm bad with titles. But she has been very active herself as sort of an activist and using her sociologist background to study policing in Westchester on her own. And now she's doing it in the DA's office, and she's going to create basically information systems and data collection systems that will help us really see where the problems are and make those numbers transparent, and more importantly, help us change it. And then the last thing I would say, so that's a big deal, and I'm so excited to have her. It took a lot to find a position to be able to create for her, but we did that. And the last thing I would say is so much of it, and this goes to, I think Assemblyman Vanel said it, about who we elect. And I'm not just saying this because I was recently elected, but it really has highlighted for me how important it is to have people who think like this in these positions, in DA positions, in police commissioner positions, obviously in legislator positions, because it's really the day-to-day decisions that I'm making every day. Should we allow someone to surrender or should we arrest them? And, I usually say, well, would you allow the person to surrender if they were Black? Are let's not just let the white people surrender. I mean, literally, that is what I've said. I do not want this to be an office where only the white people get to surrender. So if we want to let everybody surrender, except in very limited circumstances, then that can be our policy. Or we can have a policy, as many offices do, that we arrest everybody, if it's our office doing it, but let's not have a different policy based on, white collar crime versus non-white collar, white versus Black. I don't want to do that. If you come to me with a plea offer, it better be one that you would make, that you have made in the past to someone who was Black, right? Like, I want this guy had a gun and it was a one-time thing and they happen to be white. Okay, well, tell me, when did you make that plea offer to someone who was Black, a kid on the street with a gun? So those kind of day-to-day decisions, you have to, I'm going to keep using your word intentional because it is so important. You have to just think like that. And, prosecutors, even with good intent, don't always do that. And so that's, I view, part of my job is to ask those questions. So I think that's where accountability and breaking down the racism in the system kind of come together.
Wow, thank you. But before you start, Leroy, Rasmia want to have just a little input there.
I did. I'll be quick because I know we're trying to move on to the next question, but I did want to reflect on a moment that that I experienced these past few months working on Long Island on both Nassau and Suffolk's Reimagine plans. And we had a conversation, we were having a conversation with our police commissioner, and we were discussing the hiring process, right? How, just starting from the very beginning, right? Because we're talking about a system that was created, developed, and every aspect of it has white supremacy written into it, right? And I remember we were talking about the hiring and the recruitment process, and we were talking about just the process. What are the different steps and whatever. And it became obvious to us that yes, they do polygraph. Yes, they do. Like the things that we know they do. But at no point do any of the vetting had to do directly with the biases that they come into, whether they're white, Black, Chinese, Asian, whoever, it doesn't matter. There was nothing in the process that vetted, that examines the biases that our police officers are coming into the system with, right? It was basic background checks, have you committed a crime? I can be racist as hell and never have committed a crime, right? And these are the people. So when we talk about accountability, and even to refer back to your first question on how do we eradicate systemic racism from our system, like those are the types of things that we need to start like really delving into. How are from the very beginning, are we weeding out those individuals that are coming in with those biases and in a very heavy fashion? And that was, you know, and I'll be very transparent for using the word that, you know, when everybody talks about this diversity in recruitment, diversity in hiring, I am very cautious to promoting that as a great plan, because again, we're talking about a system that is seated, embedded, white supremacy is embedded in it. And unfortunately, many of the cops, no matter what race they are, when they agree then to become part of the system, have to agree to incorporate white supremacist, you know, ideation and tendencies, whether they want to or not. So the importance, you know, we really, our solutions and our discussions really need to focus heavy on the dismantling of the white supremacist nature of our law enforcement systems.
You know, what I was about to say, Rasmus, you tied right into it. Two things. First of all, DA Rocha mentioned the task force recommendation for a CCRB type agency. We did make as one of our recommendations that the county pass a law to create the Office for Police Accountability to investigate allegations of misconduct. Now, of course, were that created, and I do know that the legislators were receptive when we explained the background of what we would, how we came up with that recommendation. Initially, it would be limited to county police because the Westchester County Police only have jurisdiction over parkways and what have you, and two municipalities, Mount Kisco and Cortland. But we also put in there opt-in to allow additional jurisdictions to opt into that. I think what we found in the task force is some of the police commanders who would participate would prefer that, as opposed to having their own CCRB, have an outside agency or a statewide agency do that investigation. And I mentioned that we submitted 51 recommendations, then the county legislators came up with 52, and 52 was exactly what Rasmia was just talking about, and that is to make sure that you, at the time of hiring, search databases to see whether or not there's any history of being involved in subversives or white supremacy organizations, and make sure that you have something in place in hiring to try and screen that out.
Wow. Whew. That's a whole lot to unpack right there. But it's interesting, Leroy, because I wanted to, you know, actually follow up with what you're leading into, or just led into, was pretty much, you know, and anyone can answer this. How confident are we that the recommendations from all of these police reform task force around the state, how confident are we that they will be strongly considered and implemented?
Well, I know that I'll let, I saw this, Colin, you had your hand up. You can go ahead and speak.
Yeah, I'll just say that, I mean, I can't speak for outside of Westchester County, but I can tell you that here in Westchester, the Board of Legislators, the county executive, the district attorney, and the Department of Public Safety are all very much, you know, in favor isn't the right word, are very much willing and supportive of implementing most, if not all, of the recommendations. And in addition to that, some of that is already underway. I think that I just, want to point out that this is a process, and it's a it's a comprehensive process, and as each speaker has touched on, we are like so many people that have come before us. We are trying to address issues that have been with us since time immemorial. I don't know if you're a Billy Joel fan, but there's that song "We Didn't Start the Fire." It's these issues, and someone pointed it out, I think, in the chat here, that these issues are systemic, but they're systemic because of the people that are part of the system. And so there's a number of the recommendations I think that you'll see in relatively short order. Some have already begun to be implemented. Some are in the process of being implemented, and then some, like for example, the Office of Police Accountability, are in the process of being implemented. But there's a whole process, legally, policy-wise, politically, that has to be navigated in order to do that right. But to answer your question, succinctly, we are very much intending to and moving forward with implementing the recommendations from by the given by the task force. And right now the process is really a matter of prioritizing those and then forging ahead with them in a way that will bring about change quickly, as quickly as possible, but also in a manner that's calculated to be effective and long lasting.
Yeah, Brother Early, from the little place where I sit, it's not about company being comfortable where it's going to go or what have you. We have to, number one, it was a fight to get those projected recommendations to the counties and to have them give the reports. Also, these counties, all these counties that we have across the state is different. We have to not only now, at least we got to the point in 2021 where there's where the counties have to have these recommendations, right? Now we have to go to a point where we have to make sure that there's oversight and we stay on top of it and we make sure that they're implemented. But another part we have to talk about too is, if we talk about people of color, Black and brown folks, and their relationship to this criminal justice system, our job is not to make it. We're not going to do well if we make it comfortable and we're still at the bottom. Our job is not to make the police nice to us, or the DAs nice to us, or the judges nice to us. Our job is to prevent us from going into the criminal justice system in the first place. We must make sure that we have economic opportunities and other kinds of opportunities to prevent that. We must talk about the Kappa League, what you guys do, which is a big deal, right? We have, our job is to make sure that, again, we have to have a fair system, but we have to make sure that there's less Black and brown folks that are, that even associated with the system. Brother Early, when you told your story about when they came up to you, the cop, but you had, I'm not too worried about you and your relationship with the police, right? I had these issues too. I'm not too worried about me and those kinds. We have to make sure that, we prevent us from getting even into touching and brushing the system. Because once you're in, it's hard to get out.
I'll go after. I just want to say I'm moving to Westchester. I will tell you that we are in such a bad place on Long Island, and I see one of my colleagues, my fellow NASA Long Islander, Ed Campbell, on the call. Hi, Ed. actually in especially in Nassau County, so Long Island is made up of 2 counties, Suffolk and Nassau County. Nassau County failed royally throughout this process. I mean, failed isn't even the word. It was such a bamboozlement of community input, community engagement. We're actually in the process of trying to fight directly. I believe tonight some of our coalition members are having conversations with the Attorney General's office. We're actively fighting for the police plan to be scrapped completely, because it was so not reflective of anything the community needed. It literally was a document that was put together by law enforcement, stamped and delivered by our executive director, and it had nothing, no reimagining to do involved. There was an article that came out, I believe, last week, and Newsday is one of the biggest newspaper here in Long Island, and Letitia James herself has called out Nassau County for their horrible plan, especially the lack of there being an accountability mechanism in place. Suffolk County did a better job. Their process was more inclusive. I don't want to, say that it was just a semblance. It was more inclusive. They did make some more effort. But in general, we knew what we were up against. We knew we were up against 2 almighty systems here in Long Island that were going to fight us tooth and nail to reimagine policing at all. And what happened was eventually the 3 major coalitions formed that were super diverse in community membership. And we developed our own plan, and it's online. It's an amazing plan. It's just the beginning. We call it it's the people's plan. And it summarized the recommendations that were really coming from the community, from the people, because unfortunately Nassau and Suffolk County government were hell-bent on just creating their own plan that really was not reflective of anything that the community really needed and wanted. At the end, it's People's Plan Part 1, but very little parts of it were really adopted, and where we stand right now, post April 1st, is fighting for, number 1, to understand what's the governor's process. We want to understand, was this just a deadline where plans had to be submitted? What is the criteria for now judging these plans? Or was it just a performative type of executive order? That's number 1. And number 2, really just trying to fight back and make sure that we have this viable alternative plan, which is the people's plan. And our fight right now is to try and get the county's plans thrown out.
Yeah.
Brother Early, I know you want to go into something else. I just want to add this. We know that when Governor Cuomo first announced this directive, this executive order, he made certain requirements that had to be done, such as public hearings, et cetera. But he also tied it to future funding if, in fact, there was non-compliance. Now, in terms of where that's going to go now, in terms of what's going to happen in Albany, I'm sure some things have changed since the time that he put it in effect, and we'll see where that goes. However, I believe in terms of what I saw and talking to people around the state, and based on what Rashma is saying, even right now, it had the effect of allowing the public and the community to weigh in to talk about reimagining. And so it has accomplished a lot thus far. And it is we had, for example, one community, Cortland, that filed a plan even when it didn't have to, because it was under the auspices of Westchester. And so, and you have one Pelham doing a plan and asking fellow man, where is yours? So people are putting pressure on their police departments to do something. And so I think that what's going to come out of this is something, the same sort of thing, more action that did come out of the fact that a lot of people were quote unquote woke as a result of George Floyd's murder.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all your valuable input. And I want to stay on topic, but just to pivot just a little bit, because some of you know I'm young at heart, and I love working with our youth, and I love our Kappa League program and things of that nature. But Clyde mentioned something a little earlier, talking about the cradle to prison pipeline. Some of us have read the new Jim Crow, and I would like to just open this up to, of course, any of you that would like to address it. What are some proactive ways or measures that will realistically prevent our adolescents, our young men, from being exposed to the criminal justice system?
So I'll go. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that probably other people can speak to better than I can about, pre-K and education and, all sorts of social services and government services, and, where my office can play a role, we certainly will and do. But in terms of from where I'm sitting, what can I do? I think there's a couple of things, one of which is increasing the diversion programs that we have available for youth in particular, but frankly, it's for adults too, because, the research shows basically that once someone gets into the criminal justice system, even for a minor offense, even if there's no jail time, even if it's a misdemeanor, whatever the conviction and process results in, whatever the end result, that is usually the beginning of that, we can call it, whatever you want to call it, the revolving door, whatever it is. But once you're in the system, it's harder to get out. And that's borne out. I talked about data. I like data and research. And so we, again, created a couple of new positions. Lila Curtin, who many of you, I think, know, she was on before. She's an executive position in my administration, and one of the areas that she oversees is alternatives to incarceration and diversion. And she's been working closely with someone named Adam Mansky, who we have basically hired on contract. He used to be with the Center for Court Innovation, CCI, in the city, and went off on his own. And so now he's kind of working with us on a contract basis to help us both evaluate the existing diversion programs and create new ones. And so the idea, we're going to be announcing soon the first of its kind in Westchester, of a misdemeanor diversion program. And the idea is that, basically people get chances, and doesn't get you in the system the first time, especially as a young person, that you mess up, because everyone messes up. And recognizing, another, going back to so that's sort of a big programmatic point that I think, over time will have an impact, because that's what, again, the data shows us in terms of reducing recidivism and repeat players in the criminal justice system. But then again, in the day-to-day decisions, there's obviously youth court, and we're partnering with judges around the county who are creating their own youth courts, and in New Rochelle and Mount Vernon, which is great. But then there's the cases where, we have to look at, okay, this kid is, 20, he's still 20, right? Like, is his brain fully developed, from a developmental point of view. And that's, again, it's about asking the questions. And this is where it comes down to the people that are involved in the process. And obviously, younger than 20, even more so. But today we had a discussion about something and the guy was 20 and basically he's a kid. That doesn't mean there's no accountability, but you have to look at the case differently and you have to take that into consideration in a way that has not been done enough until this point. So those are some of the things. And there's also we're doing a lot of work on anti-violence, anti-gang intervention programs with different groups. So I think there's a whole host of ways that our office can be involved. I would say the diversion and the sort of approach to cases where younger people commit even real crimes like stabbings, but taking that into consideration is the best way to give a second chance.
Yeah, if I can just follow up on what the DA was just talking about. In my other job, I'm an attorney, and I've done criminal defense work for the past 14 years, I guess, here in Westchester and surrounding areas, but mainly Westchester. And I think that what the DA was just talking about, or the fact that the DA is talking about these sorts of initiatives being taken by the district attorney's office, that in itself, I think, in terms of dealing directly with this issue of the interaction between, young men and women of color with the criminal justice system. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in court in front of a judge, whether it's a local judge or a county court judge, and watched two people with the exact same charge, but who were not the exact same types of people, get completely different responses. And I'm not saying that to disparage the judiciary or to disparage other prosecutors. I think that going back to I believe the assemblyman touched on this, or at least alluded to it. We're talking about a system or an environment where we all come into it with our own sort of presuppositions and unconscious biases, and there's not a person either on this panel or in this chat room that doesn't have one, or some, or many. But what we try and do is we try and realize where those are impacting people beyond ourselves. And I think that a big part of sort of breaking down the disparity in terms, whether it's in sentencing or just overall treatment in the criminal justice system between young men and women of color and their white counterparts, is where you have a district attorney and a district attorney's office with policies like the ones that the DA was just talking about, where things like the fact that the person is a young person, it's their first time interacting with the criminal justice system. Those should be the real guiding forces in terms of determining the outcome of those interactions. I'll just note, because I see she is on here, Sherilyn Pulver is one of our deputies in the Westchester County Department of Probation. She's also a good friend of mine and a former, is it 30-year or 27 years as a legal aid, 35 years, 86 years as a legal aid attorney here in Westchester and in Brooklyn. And we've sat in courtrooms together and had these very same conversations as part of the criminal defense bar. There is a lot that the prosecutors can do. There's a lot that the judiciary can do in terms of making sure that, look, if people don't get treated the same in the criminal justice system based on a lot of factors, and just to sort of step back for a minute from more of a macro standpoint, before becoming a legislator, I was a school board member in the city of Peekskill for about 6 years, where we talked, about the school to prison pipeline, but that's along the same pipeline that the cradle to prison pipeline is, obviously. We talk, we dealt with the fact, school boards have to deal with the fact, and we have a school board member who, Peekskill City School Board member who is on the call right now, Sam North. We have to deal with the fact that different persons of different, students of different ethnicities are treated differently in schools. They're treated differently by the faculty. There's higher suspension rates among young Black men and women, and that's directly related to we talk about the school to prison pipeline. And again, that's maybe, a bit of a not ancillary, but, just taking a step back from this whole issue. There's so many areas and so many things that, need to be addressed in terms of our environment, in terms of economics. Poverty is probably the number one indicator of educational success in our system, and consequently, where you find more impoverished districts, you tend to find more students having interactions with the criminal justice system that have much longer lasting impacts on their lives as they move forward. So there's so many different parts of this process, but when we talk specifically about criminal justice reform, there really has to be this overhaul in terms of how we treat our young men and women of color who come in contact with the criminal justice system at a younger age, who are maybe more likely to be come in contact or to be targeted by the police because of their race, because of their ethnicity, and who, once they get into the system, will have much less opportunities to avail themselves of and to get out of the system. But I think, I'm happy to see, just, in terms of seeing our new district attorney, the initiatives that she is putting forth, I think are certainly moving us in that direction. Thank you.
So I love this question as somebody who runs a youth and family support agency. And really, this is at the core of our mission and our work for the past 21 years. First of all, I want to thank Colin and Miriam for everything you've stated, because I think it's important for us to be able to recognize our lanes and what we should be doing in our lanes. And then coming together and being able to partner in an intentional fashions, but recognizing what our different positions and expertise are, being able to rely on each other's expertise, and respecting each other's expertise to come up with a holistic solution and approach. And some may start to wonder by the end of this call and saying, why are you still in Long Island? Because a lot of the work is very frustrating out here. Our interactions with law enforcement and the DA's office has been one where they do not respect a community partnership, like a true community partnership. In many ways, they are very confused as to what their role is. We've had our DA's office try and start street outreach programs, not understanding the ethical contradiction there. Like, there are groups that do street outreach, there are community groups that do that is not for you to do. That's actually very problematic for the DA to be leading a street outreach group. But there are things that we can be working with, towards together, right? Us doing street outreach and you focusing on this and coming together in a fashion that makes sense. The same with law enforcement. I mean, again, one of the things that our police departments in our reimagine, because this was so reimagining, being very sarcastic, was talking about putting more money into their PAL programs and their mentoring programs, and we're going to invent new mentoring programs. And I was like, well, there are groups that do mentoring. Like, why do you have to continue to pad the police department's, budget with more mentoring programs when the community does that? Let the community take the lead in mentoring programs. And I'm not saying that police should not be involved in it, but the community can lead those projects and be in partnership with law enforcement, with the DA's office to provide that, right? So I wanted to state that. I mean, the other thing that I wanted to also point out is, you know, and I've mentioned it before, Long Island is one of the most segregated regions in the country. I myself personally have lived a tale of two cities here, and have experienced from the day of birth the contrast between the resources and opportunities that are provided to white affluent communities versus the Black and brown communities. So I was born, I had the blessing to be born on the North Shore of Long Island in a very rich town, Roslyn, known for its mansions, lots of money. I was a poor Latina growing up there, but I was still benefiting from living there, from a great educational system, from the lack of exposure to constant violence. I never had to hear, you know, of my friends getting stabbed and killed and bullets and all of that. But at the same time, I was not welcomed in my community. So I naturally drifted. And as a teenager, my friends were in Hempstead, in Brentwood, in Copiague, in the communities of color. So it was interesting being a young girl that would go to school and sleep in Roslyn, but hung out, and my peers were really from other communities, and seeing how different things were. And it wasn't because white kids were not involved in drugs. It wasn't because white kids did not, you know, commit crime, but it was just so different to see how it was treated, right? And then I also was very humbled and understood the resources and benefits and blessings that I had from being a resident of Roslyn. You know, so when we talk about proactive ways and measures, this is, you know, I bring my personal life experience, my trajectory into my day-to-day work. You know, it's the basics. It's the basics. You know, we're very involved in trying to work with our, you know, you mentioned a school board member. We're very involved with working with school administration to address the disciplinary policies. We're very involved in, working with our local departments of labor, right? Our kids aren't naturally exposed to career and workplace conversations the way that, you know, affluent kids in white communities are. Just the healthcare disparities. There's, you know, all the natural, benefits and kind of luxuries, quote unquote, that a lot of people, you know, in more affluent communities take for granted. Really, the goal is to we need to start addressing and focusing on how do we decrease the equity gap in every ways possible. You know, when we talk about everything, you know, all aspects of life. And the last part, because it's been a big focus, is also acknowledging the trauma that our communities have experienced for generations. My organization is doing a lot of intentional healing work. It's not a matter of just being trauma informed. We don't want to focus on the trauma. We need to acknowledge the trauma and provide spaces where our communities, and that has a lot of different looks and faces to it. But it's been very fruitful for us, really providing spaces and having discussions and conversations with our youth and with their families, because this is another pet peeve of ours, is people focusing on doing youth work and then only doing it with youth. The reality is that they are part of family structures, that if we do not embrace family structures, we are hitting our heads against the wall and we're not accomplishing much. So really providing healing spaces and healing opportunities for our communities to be involved with, and that also involves a recognition and a reckoning with the trauma and the injuries that have been, you know, committed against our communities.
That was a whole lot, and you really touched on pretty much every session that we have done thus far and the ones that are upcoming in regards to some of these components of systemic racism. you know, the education, health disparities, and you know, fair housing. You know, we even had to touch on, I think the last one was fair housing. We had to touch on, since you're out on Long Island, the whole foundation and concept of Levittown. And, you know, so it's just, you know, bringing all this home, but still providing, you know, some solutions to try our best to address, you know, what has been, you know, pretty much ingrained and entrenched over the generations. Ladies and gentlemen, this next question is actually, it's a 3-part, but it's actually one question wrapped up into three separate parts. It's interesting, but it all touches on it. And I think most likely Colin, Clyde, and Mimi will be able to address this, because it is talking about legislation, but it's going to be kind of tricky. So in 2020, right, the governor signed into law repealing 50A. One, what are your thoughts on its impact within marginalized communities? But then you have to tie in, is there a link between gun violence in Black communities and the excessive force used by police, which also is followed up with the bill here in the state of New York, the state legislature passed in regards to bail and discovery. Some have said this has been a potential reason why there's been an uptick in shootings and crime, and that it's led to people, you know, being arrested and then released only to commit the same crime. So I know that's a whole lot. So I don't know if DA Rocha will be able to address some of that, and do you feel some of your resources and hands are tied with this law? And then Clyde, what does this law say about what you have going on?
So yeah, that is a lot. Let me start with one maybe small point, but could become a bigger point down the road. The idea that gun violence is on the rise. I know it is in certain areas. I do not yet know that that is true in Westchester. And it, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but I want data, right? So it feels like gun violence is on the rise in Westchester because there have been some high profile shootings. We had one in New Rochelle that would qualify as a mass shooting. It was very brazen. We had a 6-year-old boy that was hit in the arm. He's okay. In Yonkers, you know, there've been, and you know, you see the headlines, like the New York Times had a headline about, you know, gun violence on the rise. But then when you read it, it was about, I'm forgetting where, but it wasn't even New York. It was LA, I think, or something. So, you know, I feel like there's a lot of times that we just sort of accept the proposition that's underlying the question, and some of the data that I've seen in the past few weeks, actually, in Westchester, actually show gun violence going down. I don't know the answer. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's, you know, that's the end of the story. We're trying, it's hard to get real data, but the GIV data that we were sent recently showed that in Yonkers and Mount Vernon, actually, shootings were down. And, you know, we also can't compare anything to 2020, although frankly, I think 2020 was very low because of the pandemic. So I think we have to make sure, and this goes to the bail question too, like we have to, first of all, make sure that we know what we're talking about when we say gun violence is on the rise. Is it really, or does it feel that way? And by the way, it's not insignificant if it feels that way. That means we have communities that feel insecure, that feel scared. We got to address that also, but it's a different issue than the numbers actually being up. And then we got to talk about the cause, and that's where Kathy Kaufman, my PhD sociologist who's now on board, I hope is going to help, because, you know, people are quick to say it's bail reform. Look, there are things about bail reform that I like. There are things that I don't like, and I actually may come forward publicly with some of those things, though, you know, those may not make me so popular. But but the bottom line is someone going to show me that the people being arrested for these gun crimes that are supposedly on the rise are people who would have previously been treated differently under the bail system? I mean, like that's the only way this can really be true, or that they all now know, well, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna get out right away, so it's okay for me to commit a crime. Or is it a rise in the number of guns because gun sales have gone through the roof? The number of illegal guns coming into New York is through the roof. Maybe that's the cause. So, again, like I know that the press buys into it because they're easy talking points, and some of it makes sense. And I'm not saying there's no truth to it, but it's not that simple. And when we accept those sort of underlying facts, as I heard it frankly on the network I used to go on a lot, MSNBC, Chris Hayes asked a question to Congressman Bowman about the rise in gun violence, and it was Chris Hayes. It was last night. I just happened to turn it on at that moment. He didn't cite a statistic. He just said the rise in gun violence in your district. And Congressman Bowman answered it as if that was a fact. And I was thinking, well, but really, is it? So I think we have to make sure to question those publicly and find out the real answer. Because if gun violence is on the rise, and if it is because of bail reform, then we need to fix that. I don't know that those things are true, but if it is, then we do need to address it. And I will be the first one in line to do that. In terms of the repeal of 50A, I mean, it's huge. It is, I think, has an impact in the sense of, I think we're still working through how it plays out in cases on a day-to-day basis. I know we are, because we, again, just created a new unit within the office to specifically address how to collect that data and put it out there. And we're still working through that. I literally have scheduled this week, maybe tomorrow, no, Thursday, a meeting with a police chief where we are going to talk about this issue, about what they really have to turn over, because there's still a lot of resistance to it on the police side. Understandably, it's a huge change. It's going to take some time. I don't know how much of an impact it has on the community. I mean, I imagine that we'll see if it sort of increases people's trust and ability to have faith in the police officers that are there doing their jobs. But I wonder if it's a little too removed. The idea being that once the information's out there, people are supposedly taking more action on people who are police officers who are problematic. I think that will take some time to see if it really helps with that. I forgot what the third part of it. There was another part of the question.
That was, oh my goodness.
I may have answered most of it.
Yeah, you actually answered most of it.
Okay.
I didn't know if Clyde had a little input.
Okay. So you asked, first of all, you asked about 58. So just, again, I'm an attorney, but I like to make it plain. So, average folks don't know what 50A is. So one of the things we fought for, and one of the problems we saw in throughout our state is transparency in the police department. So it was hard to find the bad police. How do you find the bad police when the records are sealed and you can't see what the disciplinary records are? That's what this 50A thing addresses, to make sure. And is it perfect? I'm not sure. Is it better now? Yes. Our goal is to make sure, just like a bad teacher, just like a bad politician, just like somebody bad at work, that you cannot hide your record. You can't, if you do something bad, if you're a bad cop, they can't send you to this precinct or that precinct or that precinct. Look at what happened to George Floyd, right? That cop had a record. If they had these kinds of laws in place, you would know. We got to be able to, one of the things about systemic change is to have these kind of laws to make it transparent, so that folks can't hide behind the blue wall. And I think that law has changed a lot of the conversation and a lot of there's a new normal in the police in the police department, and which we're still working through it. DA Rocha is right. And it's great to have her here to sit, for us to have this exchange to talk about these things. These issues are difficult and hard, but we have to make it. So I think that we have to make it more transparent to find out, again, to smoke out bad cops. There are a lot of good cops out there. We got love for the good cops. My brother-in-law is a cop, right? We want good cops out there, but we have to be able to smoke out the bad cops. Bail reform. People would go to jail, and a lot of Black and brown people would be in jail for nonviolent, low-level crimes and sit in jail for years to waiting for trial because they can't afford hundreds of dollars of bail. Does that make sense? Then when we passed that law, there are newspapers out there saying that, oh my gosh, because we don't have bail for these low-level crimes, now crime went up. And people bought into that, right? So if you could afford a few $100s, a few $1,000s, it's not to say that you get off or what have you, you get off on bail. But if you don't have that little money, you can't. We've had, and I don't even want to mention, there's so many names of young men and women that took their lives or that got injured in jail because they couldn't afford a few $100s for being accused of stealing a cell phone. That's what the situation with bail reform. Gun violence. One of the things that we have to, and I just want to bring this to the ground. New York is opening up now. It's summertime, it's hot outside. And folks have been indoors, Zooming, distance learning, or what have you. Young folks are coming outside. People are coming outside, what have you. What are we going to do? Are we gonna work with the community programs, with like Rosama's program and other programs to anticipate what's gonna happen, anticipate folks coming out or what have you? Are we gonna make sure? Are we going to boost the Kappa League for this summer? Is Colin Smith gonna give more money to these cats? Is Clyde Bonnell gonna give more money? So we have, one of the things is that this year, in our budget, for the first time, New York, we have money to address gun violence. Is it more? Is it less? It's too much, whatever it is, right? But we have money to address with programs to prevent preventive programs for gun violence. For the first time we've ever had that, $10 million, but that's across the state. We have to be able to address that. As far as over policing, again, is there the cause? Is that not the cause, or what have you? We have to make sure we have to address good policing. That's why, Brother Frazier's organization is so important, to be able to make sure that he's working with the police, he's working with the DA, he's working with the community. We have to have we have to have the policing to become accountable. But listen, Brother Early, I don't think I've ever seen a perfect law. As a matter of fact, our Constitution ain't perfect. As a matter of fact, our Constitution is over 200 years old, and we still amending that bad boy. So are we on the road of getting a better system? And I think that, look, you could attack the law that we had to make the police records and the disciplinary records more transparent. I think it's a good law. I think that it goes in the right direction. Bail reform, I think it goes in the right direction. Discovery, you talked about discovery. In New York State, we made it difficult for a defense attorney to get evidence to properly defend their clients. Most of them Black and brown, where they couldn't have a fair shot of defending themselves. We're still working to make a better system, and don't underestimate the power of laws, right? We are a country of laws, and we have to make sure that we hold Colin accountable. You hold Clyde accountable. We got to hold the lawmakers accountable to make sure that we have a fair legal system, so that we have the opportunity to live. We just don't want our necks somebody's knee on our neck. We just want to go to walk down the street safe. We just want to go to school. We just want to play video game. We don't want much. We just want to be safe, just like everybody else. So, but we have to have the laws in place to be able to do so.
Definitely. Oh, Colin?
Thank you, Andre. Just briefly, because I think that the DA and the Assemblyman said pretty much everything that you'd want to say about these topics in this forum. But to piggyback off of something that Clyde just said about laws, I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, the law might not change how you feel about me, but it can restrain you from putting a noose around my neck. And whether or not, the laws that we put in place today have an immediate effect, or even in the short term or the short to midterm have the effect we're looking for, time will tell. And I just, to touch briefly on the bail reform and discovery laws, I do think that, again, drawing on my experience as a criminal defense lawyer, it is absolutely positively, and Sherilyn put a comment in the chat box about this, 100% correct, that if you end up getting locked up, regardless of what the charge is, but we're talking about bail reform, which deals primarily with misdemeanors, bail as it relates to misdemeanors. If you end up getting sent in, whether it's here in Westchester to our county jail, or if you happen to be in New York City and end up getting sent to Rikers Island for a misdemeanor because you couldn't make the $500 bail. I started out as a prosecutor in the Bronx District Attorney's Office. And basically, if a judge sent more than $500 or $1,000 bail, that was tantamount to what we called remand. And what that means is that, because of the fact that most people that were getting arrested in the Bronx and getting bail set on them didn't have any means whatsoever to bail themselves out. They, if you got arrested for, jumping a turnstile and the judge set bail on you because you had one or two priors on that, well, you're going to Rikers to wait out until the case is concluded. And typically speaking, if you're sitting in a place like Rikers Island and you're 18, 19, 20 years old, or 40, 50, 60 years old, however old you might happen to be, you probably don't want to sit there for too long. And when the DA comes back and says to your defense lawyer, well, if he just pleads guilty, he can be out tomorrow. Well, you're probably going to do that because you don't want to spend the next 6 weeks or whenever your next court appearance is sitting there. And of course, the consequences of that are, well, now you're out of jail, but now you've just either acquired a criminal record for the first time, or you are now, increasing your criminal record, which of course has its own set of consequences. So the bail reform issue or discussion is about justice, and it isn't just about whether or not someone can make the bail. Of course, that's a central part, but it's about what the impact of a system that someone who doesn't have the means to make bail, what that means for them, both in the short and the long term. And that's not to say that there aren't some things about it that need to be tweaked and need to be worked out. But we're moving it in the right direction, and I think that it's absolutely a matter of addressing the systemic inequities within the system.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As I knew we would go over, this has been a very, very, very informative conversation. I do have just one question before we wrap up. And it's everyone has pretty much a mobile device, a smartphone now. So everyone has cameras, everyone's taking videos, everyone's taking pictures. Some of this information, all of this footage has been very critical to navigating the narrative when something occurs. But I want to ask a question. Has the implementation of body cameras improve matters when it comes to the justice system and potentially holding parties accountable for their actions?
Yes.
All right.
I mean, as I said at the beginning, you know, I review all the cases now with our prosecutors who work on complaints against police officers, and you know, video makes a huge difference. And I don't, in some ways, a video taken by a bystander is actually easier sort of to watch. It's from a better angle in a way. We can't rely on, you know, people like bystanders to do that. I mean, it was pivotal in the George Floyd case, but it's not their burden. It shouldn't be their burden to bear, and can be at times unsafe. I'm not saying people shouldn't ever do it. I'm just saying it can create additional situations. And you know, then you will always have the question of, you know, did we get the full scene? I mean, we've had cases where our prosecutors have gone and gotten surveillance video from street cameras and pieced it together. I mean, really incredible work. But, you know, the body cams, and look, frankly, I mean, not all departments in Westchester have them yet, although I think all actually would like to and are moving towards them. I think police officers are for the most part, not opposed to them, because they think, and I don't know yet, you know, we'll have to see in a couple of years, that it will exonerate more police officers than implicate. I don't know the answer right now. I don't know. But my, just anecdotally, my discussions with police departments so far are that they are not opposed to them, even, and that the ones that don't have them would like funding for them.
Awesome.
But Brother Early, I think transparent, like I said before, transparency is good. I think the fact that, you know, the fact that body cameras, the fact that everyone has cell phone, the fact, you know, that we have video. I mean, in my life, I mean, I remember in 1992 with Rodney King, right? Watching that video back then, right? We actually saw the, you know, seeing that actually had, you know, made a difference. Seeing, you know, a lot of this stuff caught on video makes a difference. And I think that, you know, the police officers, and as the district attorney stated, you know, having that transparency, whether, you know, to implicate or to protect them, is a good thing. It's good for the community too. But not only body cam, there, you know, that we have counties that have dash cams also. In the cars also. So, you know, that transparency and having video is a good thing.
Thank you.
I just want, and I hate to end on a negative note, but and be a kind of a Debbie Downer, but you know, I think it's good. You know, I would never say body cams are a bad thing. I don't think that they're necessarily pushing us forward in the increments that it probably logically would make sense. You know, we've seen plenty of cases where there's been plenty of footage, whether it's cell phone, body cam, or whatever, and nothing happens, and there's failure to indict. And, you know, and again, and I just dare to say that it's because we live in a society that really is not prioritizing Black and brown lives, just period. And, you know, we can see it as clear as day, and we're still not seeing the type of justice that our communities deserve in these, you know, in these cases. And then, you know, I guess it depends also on jurisdiction. I mean, there's still so much involved in, you know, the acquisition, like being able to get access to body cam footage. There's still, you know, there's still a lot of ways where there are obstacles being put in place for the public to have real, like, confidence in that body cams are really having like a major difference in how the system plays its game and how things turn out. But and I know that here on Long Island, honestly, for the most part, there's not a total resistance, but there is a resistance. And again, I think that there are certain police departments here on Long Island that are their track record against, you know, violence against members of communities of color is very well known, and they don't want it, you know, for the very obvious reasons. I know that in Nassau County, the PBA wants police officers to get paid to wear them, and that's actually where it's going towards. Like, we have to pay. With the latest was they're negotiating, and they're most likely going to give Nassau County police officers body cams, but they must be paid $3,000 to wear them. In addition to their extraordinary salaries, because we know that Nassau and Suffolk Police Department are some of the highest paid officers in the country. You know, so I guess you know, it varies. Again, I'm impressed by Westchester. You know, I'm so happy for you guys. We have a ways to go on Long Island, and I just, you know, I hate to like be talking from our lens. We're just so back in the times here.
Wow.
In an effort to try to get the note a little higher, Rashma, I just wanted to note that the task force did recommend enhanced funding in order to establish a shared body-worn camera database, because one is the cameras and that are one thing, but being able to store all of the film is all of the footage is very expensive. And but that's something that we would look to try and get shared services and an easier way of doing that, because we do believe that it adds to the transparency, and that it's a useful thing to have. I know we're about to end. I just want to say something that I couldn't help but note today, because it is the 1-year anniversary of the Floyd murder, that everyone has been talking about how there were a lot of marches. There was a lot of people across the country were awakened and were thinking about the system and how things should change. And I was a little dismayed today to read in the Times that there was a study, there have been studies done to show that statistically not much has changed in the last year. That in fact, the same amounts of Black and brown people are being shot by police or being arrested and put into the criminal justice system. So this is great stuff, but we all know and recognize that we still have a ways to go. I was so happy to hear DA Rocha talk about youth court, because I've seen a youth court in existence. I visited one in Staten Island a few years ago, where you had high school youth acting as judge, defense attorney, prosecutor on a shoplifting case. And I was amazed at the verdict and the punishment that was issued. There was a lot more than I would have done as a prosecutor in criminal court. You came out of there without a record. You might have had to write a 25-page paper about why you stole it or something like that. And so that's a good way to go. And the fact that Adam Maskey's there, he was very helpful in Brooklyn when they established a young adult court where all cases, misdemeanor cases from the ages 16 through 24 would go, where defendants would be able to get services in court. So we have a ways to go, and we're moving along in that direction. And hopefully a year from now, we can talk about things that have changed.
Thank you, Leroy, and thank you all. You know, it's interesting, Leroy, you started off with the 1-year anniversary and everyone being woke, and then of course, you know, the rallies, the protests that went on, you know, and it was great to see that, you know, unfortunate circumstance, but, you know, I started questioning those in attendance. You know, you want your voice to be heard. However, who do you want to listen to your voice? So if you don't know who represents you on the local, county, state, federal, the national level, your voice is just out in the wind. And I think that ties into, you know, the article in the New York Times, because, you know, you can go out there and run on those emotions, but you still have to hold those individuals that you were supposed to elect to represent you. You have to hold them accountable. Everyone, thank you. It was amazing, a lot to unpack, a lot to process, but you know what? We are here for the long haul. And then when it comes time, we will pass that baton on so the fight will continue. So, as stated, we were here to discuss the impact of systemic racism and how some of those components impact our everyday facet of lives. So on behalf of the leadership of the New Rochelle-White Plains Alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, being led by our Pomar, Pierre Oscar, we just want to thank you this evening as you stay entrenched within the complexities of the criminal justice system. We would like everyone to please take the time to subscribe to our YouTube channel, NRWP Kappas, to view this and other societal discussions and events that may be of interest to you. Join us next month for, I believe that date is June 22nd at 7 p.m. as we will have invited panelists addressing the topic of employment and systemic practices. I'm going to leave you with this, and this is one of my tags on my signature. From a noted historian and one of my heroes, a poet, but not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. James Baldwin. Thank you once again. God bless. Have a great evening and a great remainder of the week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.